Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Juice Box. I am, of course, the host of the show, Juice Springsteen. And today is going to be kind of another hodgepodge. As I have been saying, I feel like every couple of weeks now. But when you're in between PLEs or pay-per-views, you got certain things going on. You got episodes in the can, PLEs that are coming up, but they're just not set up yet. You just got to figure out, what's got, the wrestling world talking, and I'm going to try to gauge some of that here today, but probably a shorter episode overall. Like to kind of run down the full gear card before next week when we predict it. We'll talk about some programming notes in regards to the Juice Box for the next couple of weeks, a couple of news and notes. And that's pretty much all I've got, honestly. We'll probably do another this week. Well, not this week. We'll do this day in pro wrestling history, which is always fun to do. But as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Juicy Steen. You can also follow the show on YouTube at Juicy Steen. Instagram at Juicy Wrestling Closet. I think I said it, juicysteen.podbean.com, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and of course on Spotify, where if you'd listened to it on either of the last couple, please rate, review the show, give it 5 stars. Really would help the show moving forward. So, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Let's do programming for the Juice Box first, and then I think we'll kind of flip into WWE, and then we'll close out with some AEW and this day in pro wrestling history. So next week in the Juice Box, actually the next 2 weeks of the Juice Box, we are going to have multiple episodes. We're going to have 2 episodes at least in the next 2 weeks a piece. So that'll be fun for the listening audience, of course. Next week, we're going to have the full gear predictions, as we always do here on the show. But we always have a fun time doing the SIP series. And lo and behold, I'm going to put this one out. It's finally completed, and it's been in the can for a bit, but I was waiting for the opportune time. So next week on friend of the show, Apron Bump, another wrestling podcast out there, the hardest part of the ring. I have been on his show a few times, and we've done such reviews of pay-per-views, November to Remember 96, Starrcade 96, and most recently, which will be airing next week to coincide with this SIP series, will be Uncensored 1997. So we sat down for upwards of 2 hours and maybe 20 minutes all told, discussing Uncensored 97, the ins, the outs, why WCW failed in certain areas and yet still had really exciting, pieces every week. Great time discussing Uncensored 97, so that will be happening next week. And to coincide with that, the Apron Bump sat down with me for a episode of the SIP series here on the Juice Box, where I, discussed at length, figured out where, where his fandom came from, how he organizes some of his timeline in his timeline series for his podcast, and current favorite wrestlers, pet peeves. We do the rapid fire like we always do here. A couple of just fun topics that we delve into for a little over an hour. And not only will that episode be released next week, of course, via audio, but the video of that interview will be posted to YouTube next week in addition to the audio. So, Sip Series with the Apron Bump next week, coinciding with yours truly as a guest on the Apron Bump next week for Uncensored 1997, which will be a lot of fun. So check out at Apron Bump on Twitter to kind of gauge when that episode comes out. I want to say it'll come out next Wednesday. I think the audio and video will come out next Thursday for the Sip Series here on the Juice Box. So keep an eye and ear out for that. The following week, we will have, of course, Survivor Series predictions. Likely at least Josh Eisenberg. Who knows if we'll have LeBar. We could have a little CSR reunion once again, as we like to do here on the show. But in addition to that, I mentioned it, I believe, last week. The Main Event Maniacs guys, Brian and Jay, dove in to Starrcade 98, Goldberg versus Kevin Nash, streak on the line, championship being defended, MCI Center, Washington, D.C. A lot of interesting things the guys discussed about the show as a whole. The match, of course, itself, and the aftermath or lack thereof in regards to booking Goldberg once he, spoilers, loses the WCW Championship to Kevin Nash. I got to listen to this episode, of course, before editing down to put it in the feed, and I really enjoyed it. This might be the most enjoyable episode I've heard from the guys so far. Maybe that's my WCW bias showing through, but nevertheless, these guys put out a great show every single time that they record, and I'm looking forward to their next set of recordings, and who knows when they'll air. I've been told it could potentially have something to do with Starrcade 97 and maybe any future Sting Hogan matches as well. So if that's going to be the case, I would wager, if they're done in time, would be airing in December to coincide with Starrcade. So who knows? But yeah, next week, Sip Series with Apron Bump. I'll also be on the Apron Bump, and we'll have full gear predictions. The following week, Main Event Maniacs, Starrcade 98, Goldberg versus Kevin Nash, and the Survivor Series predictions, all here on the Juice Box. So if you have trouble finding the show, at Juicy Steen on Twitter, it's always easily accessible, and cannot wait to hear what we've got going on as we talk predictions in regards to Full Gear and Survivor Series. Looking forward to hearing what Eisenberg, potentially LeBar. I'm not sure if we'll have any Full Gear guests for predictions. We'll see. It's up in the air right now, so because we don't really know when that recording is going to take place, but we will see. Let's dive next into the WWE of it all. This was an interesting piece of business here. We're going to kind of, again, go bounce back and forth, kind of float into Survivor Series and what's happening, the latest, and then we'll dive to AEW and what have you. But Kurt Angle was, I believe, on a podcast recently and mentioned how with Baron Corbin being released, as we noted a couple of weeks ago, that he kind of felt shortchanged. He kind of felt that the retirement match, remember, Baron Corbin retired Kurt Angle at WrestleMania. That happened. So in regards to that, Angle feels that, Corbin gets released. was it all for nothing? Truthfully, was my legendary career really just devastated after Baron Corbin left? Like, is that the coup de grace of just everything? People were already critical, yours truly included, about how it all happened. I was there, WrestleMania 35, Batista and Kurt Angle having the retirements. A lot of great stuff happened on that show, but I was definitely one of the guys that was questioning whether Baron Corbin was the correct guy to retire Kurt Angle. After a while, I kind of got over it. I realized, maybe this really isn't the worst thing in the world. You've got people that need, you got people that need more than just a character to get them over, or more than just, good mic work, or vignettes, or just, you need more. And Baron Corbin, up until 2019, and I think I mentioned it when he got released, was so back and forth. Happy Corbin, bum-ass Corbin, the Wolf Dogs, the Roman Reigns feud, oh my God, with dog food. Like, there was a lot of misses, I gotta say, with Baron Corbin. You can't deny his athleticism. You can't deny his drive. His work in the ring was pretty good. But after all these ups and downs and seemingly never really going anywhere, he was pegged as the guy to retire Kurt Angle. I'm not going to sit here and slight Baron Corbin for that, as if management's going to come to you and say, oh, by the way, so our plans for WrestleMania, our biggest show of the year, there have only been, to this point, 34 of them. So for this 35th one in our, area, New York, New Jersey, Northeast, we're going to have you wrestle Kurt Angle in his last match. And not only that, you will send his ass into retirement. Okay. All right. I guess I'll do it. Was Baron Corbin going to not do that? Was Baron Corbin not going to take that? Absolutely not. Was he going to give that spot to somebody else? Hell no. Yet, of course, marks, like me, at least at the time, very critical. Why is he doing this? How has he earned this spot? And even now, I can look and say, not that it was for nothing, like Kurt might think, because of Corbin being released, but I just think there could have been better, more legacy-driven matches to have Kurt's final match. A John Cena, that's one person that could have done it. There's plenty of different guys. You could have had Shelton Benjamin have his final match with him. You could have had a lot, and they just chose not to, unfortunately. But it just was not on my bingo card for Kurt Angle to have resentment of his retirement match due to Baron Corbin's release from the company. It was a fascinating turn of events. In another turn of events, they, pronouns pal, WWE, are doing another Saturday night's main event as a lead up to WrestleMania 41. Of course, Saturday night's main event, legendary show from 85-ish to 92, and then of course the revive in 06 to 08, and now we're going to get one on Long Island, December 14th. Should be a wild scene, and it's an interesting placement for that show in particular because November 30th is Survivor Series, end of this month. You've got the first Raw on Netflix, of course, January 6th. And then the Royal Rumble doesn't take place until February 1st. So quite the bit of spacing, kind of unusually so, for WWE at this stage of the year. So with Saturday night's main event in December, it kind of helps grow that, gives it some levity, gives it some oomph, if you will, some zhuzh. And now it has been confirmed there will be a second Saturday night's main event happening in January, right before we have Royal Rumble. So you've got two huge Saturday night main event shows happening just within 2 months span. I mean, January 25th and December 14th, a month and a half out, but I kind of like it. I'm looking forward to seeing how they stack these cards, what they mean. Will John Cena be at any of these? That's a question for sure. But I like having these Saturday night's main event plugged in where it is before the first Raw on Netflix, and of course before Royal Rumble. I still can't get over that. Royal Rumble happening February 1st. It really unprecedented times here for WWE. Wanted to mention this little controversy, if that's really the term, and I kind of got in on it as well, where there were a couple tweets surfacing of just being critical of Bully Ray recently, getting a spot on TV and what have you, and he's one of these old guys that can't let their ego go away, and they have to be in the spotlight, and they're taken away from younger talent. Like a lot of these like harsh criticisms that, look, Bully Ray has been looked at as critical. He's had his ups and his downs for sure. Nobody is, questioning that. Watch his promos in ECW. He can garner heat like the best. But now, like a lot of us here, and a lot of wrestlers do, they are podcasters. They are analysts. It's what happens in pro sports. It's what happens in pro wrestling. You kind of become an analyst of what you used to do, and you bring insight from a perspective that not everybody has the opportunity to present. And, this tweet says, and I'm going to try to pull it up and read it verbatim here. It's from Jim Valley, who is a sports reporter at Figure 4 Online, National Murrow Award-winning sports reporter, journalist, podcast personality. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. He's been in there for a while. But here we go. He goes, "It seems like every generation has that one insufferable old guy who hangs on for their own ego and not to help the business. Right now, that guy is Bully Ray. He's not helping young talent or the business. He's about Bully Ray. He always has been. Bully Ray is insufferable." Bully responded a mere 30 or 25 minutes later, something like that, and says, "Dear Jim, you could not be any more wrong. Bleep you, XO, Bully." And then we got this too. How about this? "Prove me wrong. You build a young preliminary talent up to a main event draw, and I'll apologize. You have my word." They go back and forth. But this is what I had to say. I said, I think that even if it does boost his ego, which sure it could, sure, I definitely think that Bully Ray is absolutely doing right for the future of the business by utilizing the platform that he has earned with his own career accolades. That is lost in all of this. Bully Ray is not on Busted Open Radio because he's some schlub jabroni who never got anywhere in pro wrestling. He's one half of one of the greatest tag teams in the history of pro wrestling. The Dudley Boys, Team 3D, legendary. How many tag team championships have they won? Multiple companies, multiple-time world tag team champions. Just absolutely a guy that has done so much for the pro wrestling industry. It's just really tough to argue that, he doesn't deserve some of the stuff that he's doing now. Like I said, pro athletes, they do whatever, they either successful or not. How many times have you see? Look, I'm going to say it like this, and I don't mean this to shade the guy, but Dan Orlovsky, one of the just random journeyman quarterbacks in the National Football League for a few years. Kind of forgettable. I'm pretty sure he played for the Colts, maybe the Lions at some point. I'm really not sure. That's how unmemorable he is, lack of a better term. But here's the thing. Dan Orlovsky is a wonderful pro football analyst. He knows how to scope out defenses, read what quarterbacks are doing, go over plays, see how plays develop. He's a super smart guy. He's one of the best analysts that ESPN has. And they were well within their right to kind of pick who they wanted in regards to an analyst like this. And yet they decided to go with a guy with the name. Again, if you just know the name from, he's that random, like I said, journeyman quarterback, you're going to be like, wow, this guy he's not going to know anything. But he does. And he's a really smart guy in that regard for football. So with Bully Ray, I liken it the same way. Except he's earned even more accolades. He's done a lot in the pro wrestling industry. And just because he's done, a couple of things here and there in regards to, he tagged with Trick Williams. He was a referee. He did some of the stuff. He was a referee at WrestleMania in the hardcore match because it was in Philly. Like, he's not wrestling in the main event. He's not putting himself in a spotlight, taking away from others. He's being inserted into certain spots, not on his own volition either. I'm sure Triple H and, the powers that be invited him to do such. He didn't just weasel his way in. And I also just said, this seems like you just don't like him, so you should just say that. And he said, Jim responded with, tell me, what does beating Bully Ray in 2024 mean? I don't hate him. I just think he's more valuable making rare appearances. Wrestling is a young man's business. Don't be the old guy at a college party. But again, he hasn't been on TV every week. He's been doing Busted Open and commentating and refereeing. And it's one guy. There's are we gonna sit here and say, oh, Jake Roberts is an older guy, he shouldn't be doing what he's doing? I like that legends are taken seriously in AEW and given respect in WWE as well. I just don't get where some fans feel that they have an entitlement. Like, what have you done, Jim? Have you earned enough to be on screen? I'm sure you've done enough in the wrestling media journalism world, and you're an award winner and all these things, and that should give you a platform to help out the future of journalism and pro wrestling journalism and things of that nature. Does that mean if you were to do that as an older guy, I should sit here and say, well, you have no business doing that? It's an old guy's, ego that's driving you to do these things. You're not doing it for them. You're really doing it for yourself. Like that. And I'm a journalism guy too, but that doesn't mean that you have to act entitled. Like, if you've earned a spot, if you've earned anything, I think that gives you a little bit extra there, and you've earned more by earning at all. So just a little back and forth there on the old tweet machine. So that was interesting, to say the least. I also had a fun tweet that I put out there where I said, if you could go back in time to watch one pro wrestling show as a member of the crowd, what would it be? Would you choose based on what happened at the show, the historical significance, or just to see one amazing match / spectacle? I said that mine would either have to be WrestleMania 3 or WrestleMania 17. Friend of the show, 1/3 of Triple Threat Theater, Donnie says ECW One Night Stand. That is probably also in that realm. I know Drew Baydala, friend of the show, he was at both One Night Stands. WrestleMania 17, friend of the show, Justin LaBar, was at that show. Very jealous. We had WrestleMania 3 as an answer, and another WrestleMania 3. And also, Mike Nolan says, I was at WrestleMania 18, but I was in the last row of the Sky Dome. So if I could go to that and be closer, that'd be cool too. Yeah, I mean, that's also a pretty interesting take. WrestleMania 18 was wild, and, you know, that'd have been something really cool to see. Just up front, up and close and personal, see Rock Hogan. And we'll get to potentially that, type of vibe here in a moment. So let's do it. Let's talk WWE, and then we'll talk a little AEW. We'll do some This Day in Wrestling History. So SmackDown and Raw this past week, a lot happened and not much moved forward. We're in this weird frame where now they're taping a couple episodes at a time. Just kind of get some time off for the talent, and I like that, especially with the holidays coming up. And I'm sure, it'll all ramp up live week to week as we get closer to Royal Rumble and we turn into the new year with Raw on Netflix. It's going to be a whole new ball game. And leading to WrestleMania, I don't think anybody's going to want to take any time off. So that being said, these shows are going to be kind of muddied until we get to the PLEs, of course. But just wanted to touch on Raw, and then we'll touch more on SmackDown for a moment. But Survivor Series looking okay so far. 2 matches. We'll talk about the War Games match in a moment, but Damian Priest and Gunther one more time. World Heavyweight title on the line at Survivor Series. So that will be interesting. Of course, Kofi Kingston, Pete Dunne had a match. Xavier Woods, even though he's not really a heel yet, he's a great potential heel. We don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to split? Are they both going to turn heel? Are they going to turn on Big E maybe? What's going to happen here? So, Bronson Reed and Seth Rollins kicked the hell out of each other. Not sure what this means. I hope and pray they are not inserted into War Games. I think they're going to have a match together. They should have a Falls Count Anywhere match. I think that'd be wild. And then the other interesting piece here, The Miz was kidnapped by the Wyatt Six. Karrion Kross and the Final Testament confronted him. And my God, after the Wyatts come out to save The Miz turns on the Wyatt Six. So all of a sudden, The Miz is a heel again. And of course, he seems like the odd man out of this entire Karrion Kross, Final Testament, Wyatt Six, Uncle Howdy thing. But he's doing the most with what he's given. So shout out to The Miz, killing it once again. And the women's tag team champions retained, and that is it. They defeated Raquel and Liv. I still would like to see Jade and Raquel in a one-on-one. We still don't know where we're going to get Jade and Bianca splitting. I think the Royal Rumble will present opportunities for that. So we'll see. Speaking of the women, let's go to SmackDown. It was announced that we finally are getting the mid-card championship for the women on the main roster. The Women's United States Championship. We don't know when it's going to debut. We don't know how it's going to be won, but I'm here for it. I'm not sure if we're going to get an Intercontinental Championship on the women's side, but I'll take one mid-card women's title to just pal around with. I mean, finally. It's tough with one set of tag titles. They can bounce around, that's fine. And, of course, 2 women's world titles. But it's nice to have that mid-card title. You see who's the future without having to sacrifice the world title to make that happen. And the U.S. title has a great lineage, and I'm looking forward to seeing who ends up winning the Women's U.S. Championship for the first time. course, last week on SmackDown, wow. So after the Sami Zayn accidental kick on Roman, it was an accident, and Reigns confronting Solo in the Bloodline. Solo, of course, challenges Roman, team of his choice for War Games. Sikoa introduced Sami as the 5th member, but Sami Zayn attacks Solo, Roman acknowledging Sami, and now we get Sami Zayn, the Usos, and Roman Reigns +1 versus Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, and Tonga Loa +1. War Games 5-on-5. I think Braun Breaker could be an addition to the OG Bloodline. I think you could see Paul Heyman return at Survivor Series for this match. Maybe coming out with Braun Breaker. Wouldn't that be cool? Here's the big caveat. And it's also, if it's not Cody and Kevin Owens, another bit of news here, stretchered out Randy Orton by way of pile driver. The announcers put it over huge as a band maneuver, which is pretty cool. Orton will be out likely, I would wager, till the Royal Rumble. Maybe he comes back to Saturday Night's Main Event, something to that effect, to get some revenge. But Kevin Owens, being unhinged as he is and has been for a while, seems to be on a collision course with one Cody Rhodes, but if they're not going to have that one-on-one, wouldn't it be interesting if Kevin Owens joined the Bloodline 2.0 to face Cody in the OG Bloodline? I don't think it's going to happen, though. However, what people are speculating that could happen, and I'm in the camp that it could The Rock be the 5th member of the team with Solo, Jacob, Tama, and Tonga Loa? Some say no, and the reasoning is fair. The Rock's not going to work a War Games match. He does movies. He's not doing this. He'd be out of his mind. He's never going to do that. Come on. Yeah, well, The Rock was never going to show up at Bad Blood either. That was never going to happen either. And The Rock was never going to have a huge match at WrestleMania and then pivot and have chaos ensue and lead us to one of the most chaotic weekends in WrestleMania history. But he did. And I think The Rock loves the business. I think The Rock respects the Cody Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes creation, War Games lineage thing there. I could see Cody being a member of the Roman bloodline and adding The Rock as not only the 5th member, but the benefactor, the one who has been funding and getting this second bloodline together, I think would be perfect. And here's my case. The Rock could come in dead last, the final guy, the final boss, and you could play it one of two ways. Every War Games, the baby faces never win the coin toss. They're always at a disadvantage, so the 10th guy is always the good guy. You could do that, and The Rock could come in as number 9 and give a 5-on-4 when they're dominating. Or, for once, the OG bloodline and the baby faces could win the coin toss. And who's number 10? Who's the last guy? And it's the final boss. I think that's how I would play it. And he could come in. He could hit a few of his greatest hits, the moves that we all know and love. He can come in last because he's a member of the board of directors. He can do what he wants. And he gets the pinfall on Roman Reigns. So you get I have a pinfall win over you. Maybe you get Rock versus Cody on the first episode of Raw on Netflix for the world title because Rock pinned Cody at WrestleMania night 1. Then he doesn't win that. Maybe Roman helps. And you get Roman versus Rock at WrestleMania 41 with The Rock laying claim. Hey, I pinned you in War Games. I could beat you again. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for The Rock to work War Games, and I would love to see it. So A lot of intriguing stuff on the WWE side of things. Let's cut over to AEW, where I just want to make a few notes here. Dynamite this past week was interesting. We had, of course, another piece of the Fatal 4-Way tag title entry there, where FTR took the loss, and Malachi Black, Brody King get the spot. And now we have the Outrunners, of course, Private Party defending their championships, and Malachi and Brody King. One more team will be, I think, announced on Collision to figure out who that will be. But as we lead up here to Full Gear, Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, they are having a lot of heat back and forth. They will have a match at Full Gear. Roderick Strong gets a win, so that kind of helps him out when we get to Full Gear. So, I don't know. This is the part that I didn't really like. They said, and this is the problem, is that they promoted Jon Moxley seizing control of TBS into Superstation. It really didn't happen that way, and it kind of fell flat. The crowd, by the way, sucked in Bridgeport. Swerve accidentally referred to them as Stamford. I would have preferred a WWE straight-up crowd as opposed to this particular crowd. Not great. But let's look into what we've got going here at Full Gear. Now, we're not gonna do predictions. Of course, we will do predictions next week. And I did want to note this before we talk about that with the main event, of course, with Brody King and Malachi Black versus FTR, a wonderful match, and the Kings of the Black Throne with the victory there. I'll tell you this: Brody King, I believe, truthfully, is AEW World Championship material. I don't know if many people would agree with me on that. However, I see it a few ways. I think his look is definitely worth it. I think his style of wrestling is worthy of being champion and having these car crash matches. And that leads me to my third point. What better way for Brody King to potentially enter the World Championship scene than if at some point, and I do think we're going to get this, I think Darby Allin will eventually win the AEW World title. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think he should win the world title, on his own. And then the camera pans up, and Sting has been in the rafters the entire night for that match. I think that'd be a wonderful, interesting little wrinkle to that. And if Darby Allin were to win the world title, you are out of your mind if you don't think a Brody King, Darby Allin, like no DQ match or like a cage match wouldn't be wonderful for the AEW World title. I think it would just be an interesting pivot from, your Moxleys, your MJF, Swerve, Hangman, your, Jericho, your everyday AEW champions. Give me an undersized champion. Give me a brutal, tattooed badass that could throw around the champion, and they could beat the tar out of each other for said championship. They've had matches in the past. They've been immortalized in those matches with action figures. I think it'd be a home run to get a little bit of a feud for the world title with Brody King and Darby Allin. So let's look at Full Gear. I'm going to run down the card and tell you what I think, again, without predicting anything here. We don't know who the last team will be, the Acclaimed or Roosh and the Beast Mortos. I believe that's going to take place on Collision this weekend. Winner takes on Private Party, the tag champs. The Outrunners, who I think should win, And the Kings of the Black Throne, Malachi Black, Brody King, for the tag team titles, the AEW World Tag titles. We'll have, of course, on the pre-show, QT Marshall taking on Big Boom AJ with Big Justice at ringside. MJF versus Roddy Strong. I'm sure Adam Cole will find his way in and around that match. Great return match here. Jay White versus Hangman Adam Page. Like I said, the tag title match. Chris Statlander versus Mercedes Moné for the AEW TBS title. I wouldn't mind seeing Chris Statlander take this one. That would be quite the elevation as a talent by beating Mercedes Moné, giving her first singles loss for the world title. Swerve Strickland versus Bob Lashley one-on-one. It's been hyped for a while. This match potentially happening, and now we get it for real, and I'm looking forward to it. Jack Perry versus Daniel Garcia. That's for the TNT title. I like what Jack Perry's been doing. Last week's episode was I was wrong about Jack Perry, and I contend that this is some of the better character work in AEW. So can't wait to see how that match plays out. Like I said earlier, Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher have a one-on-one match, and I'm sure that'll bring the house down. Singles match, AEW World Title, Black Denim, Black Shades, Dark version, Orange Cassidy challenging Jon Moxley for that AEW World Heavyweight Championship. This is the second Full Gear being held at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. They had the 2022 version there where Jon Moxley took on MJF, where MJF won the world title. Quite a difference a couple years makes, huh? But yeah, Full Gear coming out. The predictions will be next week. Full Gear, the show, next Saturday. So looking forward to all that. Let's close out with a little This Day in Pro Wrestling History, November 15th, where Randy Savage was born, 1952. I'd also like to shout out, it's been 19 years since we lost Eddie Guerrero this past week, so that's crazy as well. And Tegan Knox, who unfortunately just got released by WWE, her birthday, she's turning 30. So not the best birthday gift, I would wager. Just looking at some shows that happened during November 15th. Not a lot, although the ones that did take place were pretty damn interesting, I would say. At least in the past, because a lot of just house shows, non-televised stuff going on, some SmackDowns, and of course a Raw, a Dynamite here or there. But I got 3 shows to run down cards for from this day, November 15th. Saturday night's main event, we had talked about how they're reviving that once again, December 14th, and on November 15th, 1986, Randy Savage, Jake Roberts in a double DQ draw for the IC title. This took place at the LA Memorial Sports Arena, 1986. Hulk Hogan defeated Hercules Hernandez to retain the world title. Roddy Piper defeated Bob Orton Jr. The Killer Bees, Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair defeated Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. Coco Beware defeated Nikolai Volkov. And the Magnificent Morocco defeated Dick Slater in the, well, I guess main event. But, of course, for Saturday night's main event, the big matches happened first. We had Survivor Series 1998, Enterprise Center, St. Louis, Missouri. And, 19,332 in attendance. This was the Deadly Game tournament. This is arguably Vince Russo's best work as a booker and creative guy. Mankind defeating Dwayne Gill. Al Snow defeating Jeff Jarrett. Austin defeating Big Boss Man by DQ. X-Pac defeating Steven Regal. Ken Shamrock defeating Goldust. all these lead to a final match, The Rock versus Mankind. And we did the Montreal Screwjob a year later. World title changes hands as The Rock wins it, becomes corporate, which is funny because he's literally on the board of directors now for TKO, WWE, Endeavor, all that. Wins the world championship, and it was a huge swerve. He was with Vince the whole time. They set it up for Mankind to be the guy that they wanted, and yet The Rock was actually that guy. Pretty wild, but here is the meat and potatoes. November 5th, 1989, Clash of the Champions 9, New York Knockout. Jimmy Garvin, Michael Hayes versus the Road Warriors, DQ. Butch Reed, Ron Simmons, Doom defeating Eddie Gilbert and Tommy Rogers. Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane defeat Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas. Steve Williams defeated the Super Destroyer. The Steiners defeated the Skyscrapers, Dan Spivey and Sid Vicious by DQ. Lex Luger and Brian Pillman had a great United States title match here where Luger gets the pinfall. And then 5 letters, 2 words, I quit, Ric Flair, Terry Funk, one of the greatest matches in the history of professional wrestling. Unbelievable match. These two guys tore the house down. 35 years since this match took place. And just brutal. Gordon Soley, Bob Caudle on the call. The chops are insane. The build-up to this whole thing with the bag around Flair's head back at Great American Bash and how it all led to this, especially after the previous month being Thunderdome with Muta and Funk taking on Flair and Sting. Oh, man, just a wonderful match between Flair and Funk, 2 of the greatest of all time, in an I Quit match, and none have really stood the test of time more than that, I would wager. So, this concludes the Juice Box this week. Again, let's look at the next 2 weeks. Next week's SIP series featuring the Apron Bump. And also be on the lookout. Of course, I'll tweet the links out. I will be appearing on the Apron Bump discussing Uncensored, WCW Uncensored 1997. And then, of course, Full Gear AEW predictions next week as well. The following week, Main Event Maniacs, Brian and Jay dive deep into Starrcade 1998 Goldberg versus Kevin Nash. And then, of course, Survivor Series predictions, the WWE PLE November Spectacular, the 38th Survivor Series show. Pretty insane that we're this far into Survivor Series. In a couple years, we'll hit the 40th anniversary of that show, or 40th show, rather. But a lot coming down the pike here on the Juice Box as we get, we round out this year. We've got about a month and a half left of this year, and then Raw on Netflix, Royal Rumble in February, WrestleMania in Vegas. A lot going on in 2025 in regards to pro wrestling. So I hope you guys are tuned in to the Juice Box to get some good analysis and some fun interviews, SIP series, Triple Threat Theater, among all the other programming. Main Event Maniacs, of course, as well with Brian and Jay. So keep up to date, of course, at Juicy Steen on Twitter, at Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram, YouTube at Juicy Steen, juicysteen.podbean.com, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, via iTunes, and on Spotify, wherever you listen to it. On those last 3, please rate and review the show 5 stars. It would really benefit the show's growth. But I'm Juice Springsteen. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys next week for a couple episodes of The Juice Box. That was The Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to The Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.